The town of Dry Creek was quiet, its streets coated with dust that danced in the breeze. It was meant to be a day of celebration. The church bells had rung sharp and loud an hour ago, calling folks from all around. But now, the crowd that had once gathered in front of the chapel was gone, leaving behind whispers and wind. Eva stood alone on the steps of the church. Her white dress was no longer pure. Dust clung to its hem, and the lace on her sleeve was torn. Her bouquet, once bright with red roses, now drooped in her hands. Her veil had slipped down her back, and her face was pale, but not with shock, with something deeper, something older. Levi leaned against the post of the general store across the road. He hadn't come for the wedding. He didn't know her name, not then. But when the crowd broke and left her standing, he stayed. There was a silence in her stillness that told him everything he needed to know. She wasn't crying. She wasn't shouting. Her eyes didn't show heartbreak. They showed something else, a kind of tired that didn't come from a long day, but from a long life. A look he'd seen in the mirror once. She didn't speak. She just turned, slow and quiet, and walked down the steps. Her boots made soft thuds on the wooden walkway. She passed by Levi without looking up. He tipped his hat out of respect, but she didn't see. She kept walking, her bouquet slipping from her hand and landing on the street behind her like a forgotten thought. Levi watched her walk until she disappeared around the corner. Then he stood there a while longer, hands in his pockets, the wind tugging gently at the brim of his hat. He'd seen folks get left before, but not like that. Most screamed. Some begged. Others cursed the name of the one who left. But not her. She moved like someone who already knew this would happen. Someone who'd been through worse. The day faded into late afternoon. Sunlight stretched long across the buildings. The town, already quiet, grew even more still. Levi spent his time cleaning out his saddlebags and sipping weak coffee from the diner. But he couldn't shake the image of the bride, the silence in her steps, the way her hands didn't tremble, but her eyes had looked so hollow. As evening rolled in, he made his way toward the train station. It was the kind of place folks didn't linger at unless they were waiting to leave. The wooden benches out front were chipped and faded. Dust blew across the platform in small swirls. And there, on the far end, he saw her again. Eva sat alone. The dress was crumpled now, dirtier than before. Her hair had fallen loose from its pins. She didn't move, didn't cry, just stared ahead at the tracks like she was waiting for a train that might never come. Levi stayed at a distance. Something told him not to disturb her. Not yet, but he couldn't look away. Then, something strange happened. A small boy, no more than 4 or 5, wandered onto the platform. His clothes were too small, dusty, and worn thin. His hair stuck out in every direction. One of his shoes had no laces. He held a broken wooden horse in his hand, its leg missing. He looked lost, the kind of lost that made your chest ache. Levi watched him approach, Eva slowly. She didn't notice him at first. She was too still, too far inside her own silence. But then the boy stopped in front of her and gently tugged on the edge of her dress. Eva looked down, startled. The boy's big brown eyes stared up at her. "Are you my mama?" he asked. Levi felt something shift inside him. Eva blinked. For a moment, she didn't move. She looked at the boy, then around as if someone might come running to claim him. But the station was empty. The only sound was the wind and the far-off cry of a coyote. "No," she said softly, shaking her head. Her voice was rough, like it hadn't been used in hours. "I'm not your mama." The boy didn't seem to hear. He stepped closer and laid his head on her lap. Eva froze. Her hands hovered in the air before slowly lowering to rest on his back. She didn't speak again, and she didn't push him away. Levi stepped forward, slow and quiet, his boots crunching against the wooden planks. He didn't want to scare them. "Ma'am," he said gently. Eva looked up. Her eyes met his, and for a moment he saw something flicker behind them. Confusion, maybe fear. "I saw him wandering from the diner's side," Levi said. Didn't look like he had anyone with him. Eva glanced down at the boy again. "He thought I was his mother. Maybe you don't have one no more." Eva nodded slowly, but her eyes were distant. Levi crouched beside them. "You all right?" "No," she answered simply. He didn't ask more. He just sat beside them on the bench. The boy didn't move. His little hand held the edge of her skirt tight, like he was afraid she might disappear. The wind picked up again, and Eva shivered. Levi pulled off his coat and gently draped it over her shoulders. She didn't argue. They sat like that, the three of them, in silence. One broken bride, one lost child, and one quiet cowboy, on the edge of a town that had nothing left to offer. And in that stillness, something began. Not loudly, not with big words or promises, but in a small, quiet way that only those who've known loss can understand. Eva stared at the tracks. The boy nestled into her lap, and Levi stayed beside them, just watching, waiting, like he knew this moment would change everything. Eva looked down at the little boy resting in her lap. He had fallen asleep, holding tightly to the edge of her torn dress. His face was dirty, and dust covered his hands and feet. His clothes were too thin for the evening air. One pant leg was ripped, and his shirt had no buttons. He wore no shoes, just hard, calloused feet that had seen too many roads. In his hand was a wooden horse with one leg broken off, a toy that had clearly been loved too long. She brushed his hair back gently, confused. She didn't know who he was or where he came from. She had never seen him before. But still, the way he had looked at her, like she was someone he knew, someone he needed, it had shaken her more than the wedding ever could. Eva leaned down and whispered softly, "Where's your mama, sweetheart?" But he didn't answer. He only stirred a little in his sleep and held on tighter. Levi stood nearby, hands in his coat pockets. He had given it to Eva, but the cold didn't bother him. He watched her with the boy and could see the wall she had tried so hard to build slowly start to crack. Eva looked up at him. "He's not mine," she said, almost like she was trying to convince herself. "I know," Levi replied. "I don't know who he is." "He seems to think he knows you," Levi said carefully. She looked back down at the boy. "That's not my fault." No one said it was. Just then, the station master walked out from behind the ticket window. He was an older man with a limp and a loud voice that didn't match the quiet air of the town. "You talking about that boy?" he asked, pointing with his chin. "Been hanging around since the 3 o'clock train pulled out." Eva stood. The boy woke up slightly, blinking and holding his toy horse tighter. "What do you mean?" she asked the station master. "He was on the platform when I came out after the train left. No ticket, no name. No one claimed him. Figured someone would come back for him. But no one did." The old man scratched his head. "He's been sitting here since. Then I see him walk over to you like he's been waiting for you all along." Eva blinked slowly. There has to be a mistake. There's no record of him on the train. That's the strange part. He wasn't on the passenger list, and no one saw him board. But somehow, he was here after it left. Levi stepped closer, speaking softer now. "He needs a place to sleep, and it's getting cold." Eva crossed her arms. "I'm not a mother. I'm not anything." Levi didn't argue. He just looked at her with steady eyes. "It's just one night. Just so he's safe." She hesitated. Her eyes went to the boy again. He was standing now, looking up at her. His fingers reached for hers. "Please," he whispered. "Don't leave." Something in her chest twisted tight. "I don't even have a place of my own," she said quietly. "I was staying at the boarding house for the wedding. I'm supposed to leave tomorrow." "Then he can stay with you tonight," Levi said. "And I'll check with the sheriff in the morning." Eva didn't answer. She looked out across the empty tracks. The wind pushed gently at her dress. Her eyes were tired. Finally, she gave a small nod. The boy smiled up at her like she'd just saved the whole world. The walk to the boarding house was slow. Eva held the boy's hand. He walked with short, unsure steps, glancing around like someone might try to take him away. Levi stayed close, keeping to Eva's other side. No one spoke much. When they reached the small wooden house at the edge of town, the landlady raised an eyebrow. She was a sharp woman with gray hair tied in a bun and a voice like snapping twigs. "Room's already paid for the night," she said to Eva. "But I didn't hear nothing about a child." "He's not mine," Eva said. before the woman could say more. Is he trouble? No, Levi said firmly. He's just tired. The landlady sighed and stepped aside. Just keep it quiet. The room was small, a single bed, a cracked mirror, a basin of cold water, and a wooden chair. Eva lit the oil lamp and took off her shoes. The boy climbed onto the bed without waiting, curling up like he had done it 100 times before. Levi stood in the doorway. He didn't enter. Eva glanced over at him. Thank you for earlier. He nodded. You don't have to do more than tonight. I won't, she said quickly, but it didn't sound convincing. She looked at the boy. He had already fallen asleep again, his broken toy still in his hand. Levi adjusted his hat. I'll come by in the morning. We'll figure something out. Eva didn't reply. She sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the floor. Before he turned to leave, Levi said softly, sometimes life throws people in your path for a reason. She didn't look up, and sometimes life just keeps taking things away. Levi didn't argue. He tipped his hat and stepped into the hallway, leaving her alone in the flickering light. A woman who'd lost her future, now sharing her night with a boy who didn't even have a past. The morning came with quiet light slipping through the thin curtains. Eva sat on the bed, fully dressed, while the boy lay curled in the blanket beside her. She hadn't slept. Her eyes were heavy, but her thoughts were heavier. The boarding house creaked around her, thin walls, weak floorboards. It wasn't a home, just a room with a lock. She stood up, gently pulling the covers around the boy. Then she moved to the corner and began folding her things. She didn't have much, just a small bag and the dress she never got to wear down the aisle. As she worked, she felt it again, little footsteps behind her. She turned. Sam was awake and standing just a few feet away, hugging his toy horse, watching her quietly. Go back to bed, she said without turning again. But he didn't move. When she walked to the basin to wash her face, he followed. When she sat on the edge of the chair to put on her boots, he sat beside her, holding her sleeve. I'm not your mama, she said finally, not unkindly, just tired. I know, he whispered, but he didn't let go. Downstairs, the landlady was already sweeping the floor when Eva came down with Sam in tow. She gave them both a curious look. Staying another night? The woman asked. Eva didn't answer. She looked out the window. The town was already moving. Wagons, boots, dust, and whispers. As she and Sam stepped outside, she heard it. The bride who got left. Looks like she picked up a child instead of a husband. She don't look like she hates it either. Eva kept her head high, but the words dug deep. Shame burned under her skin. She walked straight to the sheriff's office. Sam held her hand tight. Levi was already there, standing by the porch. He straightened when he saw them. You going in? He asked. Yes, Eva said, short and sharp. Sam stopped. Do we have to? Eva looked down at him. His eyes were wide. Scared. I just want to ask if anyone's looking for you, she said. That's all. He gripped her hand tighter. They're not. How do you know? Because they never look, he whispered. Eva felt something break inside her. She knelt in front of him. You don't remember where you came from? He shook his head. Only the train. Then you. Levi came closer but stayed quiet. He watched Eva closely, as if waiting for her to say something even she didn't know yet. The sheriff came out. He was a wide man with kind eyes. Morning, he said, tipping his hat. You the one with the boy? Eva nodded. He says he was left after the train. The sheriff looked at Sam. No one's come forward. No reports. We'll wire the next few towns, but these things take time. What happens now? She asked. Well, he said, we can send him off to the orphanage 2 towns over if no one claims him. Eva opened her mouth to speak, but Sam jumped in first. Please no. He wrapped both arms around her waist, burying his face in her coat. Eva froze. The sheriff frowned. He seems attached. He's not mine, Eva said quietly. Maybe not by blood, the sheriff said, but that don't always matter. Back at the boarding house, Sam clung closer than ever. He followed her everywhere, to the well, to the market, even when she just stood by the window. At first, it annoyed her. Then it confused her. Now, it scared her. That night, She tried brushing his hair after his bath. He sat still, legs crossed, toy horse in his lap. Without realizing it, Eva began to hum. A low, slow tune, something from long ago. Levi stood just outside the doorway, watching. "You do that often?" he asked gently. Eva stared at the tracks, remembering her own past, remembering the child she lost, the child no one could replace. And yet, here was this boy, not hers, but still clinging. She didn't answer. She couldn't. But the way she looked at Sam, and the way her hand reached for his, said everything Levi needed to know. The wind had softened that morning. The sky, once full of stormy gray, turned gentle blue. Levi sat out back on the steps of the boarding house, whittling a piece of wood into the shape of a horse. His hands worked slow, steady. Eva came out with 2 cups of coffee and sat beside him without a word. For a while, they just listened to the wind and the clink of faraway hooves in the street. Then Levi spoke, voice low. "I had a brother once," he said, eyes fixed on the wood. "Younger than me. Name was Amos." Eva glanced at him. "He followed me into the war. I told him not to, but he was stubborn. Like me." He paused, carve another line. "He didn't come back." Eva looked down at her cup. "And the ranch?" she asked. "Gone. Had to sell it after my past. Couldn't hold on to it alone." Silence stretched between them again. Then she said, almost a whisper, "My groom left when I told him the truth." Levi looked up. "I can't have children," she said, steady but quiet. "We were weeks away from the wedding. He waited until the night before to tell me it changed everything." She swallowed. "He said I was a good woman, just not the right one." Levi nodded slowly. He didn't offer comfort, just understanding. That night, Sam cried out in his sleep. Eva rushed to his bedside. He was curled tight, fists gripping the blanket, tears streaking his cheeks. "No," he cried. "Don't leave me." She gathered him gently in her arms, pressing his head to her chest. "I'm here," she whispered. "Sure, it's all right. I'm right here." She rocked him, humming that old tune again. Slowly, the boy calmed, the nightmare fading into sleep. From the doorway, Levi watched, quietly, heart full. In the morning, Sam didn't leave Eva's side. He laughed more now, drew pictures on scraps of paper, asked questions about everything: the sky, the birds, the sound of trains. Levi took them to the edge of town to see the hills. Sam sat on his shoulders. Eva walked beside them, her hand brushing Levi's once by accident, and not pulling away. Something was changing, slowly, naturally, but Eva still kept her guard. At dinner, Levi said softly, "You'd make a good mother." She shook her head. "He's not mine. I'm not his. But he looks at you like you are." Eva stared at her plate. "That's the part that scares me." 2 days later, a letter came. The station master knocked on their door with a brown envelope in hand. "It's from the city," he said. "Someone asking about the boy." Eva took the letter with trembling hands. She didn't read it right away, just held it, staring at the name she didn't recognize. Later, when she was alone in the room, she opened it. It was short, just a few lines. "A woman named Miss Langford believes the boy may be her nephew, missing after a fire in their building. She's coming to confirm." Eva folded the paper, her face pale. Levi came in quietly. "News." She nodded. "Someone might be looking for him." Sam came running in, toy horse in hand. He stopped short when he saw her face. "What's wrong?" he asked. Eva forced a smile. "Nothing." But that night, as she sat by the window, Sam heard her whisper through the cracked door, "He'll leave too." The train rumbled away behind them as Levi tightened the saddle strap on his horse. Eva lifted Sam gently onto the second horse's blanket, her hands steady but her heart racing. They had left the quiet town behind. Now, they were heading to the city to uncover the truth about Sam, who he was, where he came from, and who had written that letter. The road was long, winding through golden fields and old wooden fences. Sam's eyes lit up with every mile, asking questions about trees, rivers, animals. Eva tried not to get too attached, but the boy's laughter tugged at something deep inside her. That evening, they reached an abandoned ranch house. The wooden roof was half fallen, but it had a working stove and dry beds. Levi started a fire while Eva unpacked the little food they had. Sam picked up a stick and tried to ride it like a horse, giggling. Levi smiled. "Come here, partner," he said, lifting Sam into the saddle. With a steady hand, he walked Sam around in circles. Sam's face lit up with joy. "I'm riding." Eva stood at the porch, arms folded, watching. For a moment, she smiled too, a soft, fragile smile that didn't last long. Later that night, Sam sat wrapped in a blanket by the fireplace. The stars blinked through holes in the roof. He turned to Eva. "Do real mamas come back?" The question cut through her like a blade. She didn't answer right away. Her lips trembled. Sam looked up, waiting, but Eva just tucked the blanket tighter around him. "Try to sleep, sweetheart," she whispered, turning her face away. The next morning, they reached the city. Tall buildings, noisy streets, and too many people walking too fast. Levi held Sam's hand. Eva walked close behind, clutching the letter. At the records office, they waited in a quiet hallway with peeling walls. An older woman came out with a thin folder in hand. "Samuel," she said, glancing at the paper. "Found in the aftermath of the Oak Street fire. No family name, no belongings." She looked at them gently. His mother passed, giving birth. No record of a father. No one's claimed him since. Eva sat down slowly, her hand covering her mouth. Sam played quietly by her feet, unaware. Levi leaned in. "So he's alone?" The woman nodded. "Far as we know." Eva's eyes filled with tears. She tried to hold them back. Levi knelt beside her. "Eva," he said softly, "you don't have to be blood to be a mother." She didn't speak, but her hand reached for Sam's. This time, she didn't let go. The town hadn't changed, but Eva felt like she had. Since returning from a city, she hadn't said much. She moved through the days like a shadow, quiet and careful, her face calm but distant. In the boarding house, she cleaned rooms that didn't need cleaning. She washed curtains that weren't dirty. She cooked soup no one asked for. The other boarders whispered about her, but she paid them no mind. Levi kept his distance too. He stayed mostly outside town, riding along the fences, fixing broken gates, and looking up at the sky like he was waiting for a sign. The truth they had found in the city still hung heavy in the air between them. Sam had no family, no mother, no father, no one, only them. But Eva hadn't said what she wanted. Not yet. Sam followed her around like a small, quiet shadow. He didn't ask questions. He just watched her, eyes wide, always waiting for her next move. One afternoon, while she folded laundry, he sat at the small table with a broken crayon and scraps of brown paper. He kept glancing at her, then back to his drawing. When he was done, he held it up proudly. "I made us," he said. Eva looked. It was a simple picture, 3 stick figures standing side by side. One tall with a cowboy hat, one with long hair and a dress. And in the middle, a small smiling boy holding both their hands. "That's you," he pointed. "And Levi. And me." Eva swallowed hard. Her hands froze on the towel she was folding. She forced a small smile, nodded once, then turned away. Later that evening, she stepped out for some air and saw him. Levi stood near the edge of town, hammering something into the ground beside the open pasture. She walked toward him slowly, stopping a few feet away. A fresh wooden sign stood in the dirt. "Ranch for sale." She stared at it, then at him. "You're leaving?" she asked, her voice low. Levi didn't turn at first. Then he did. "I saw what I needed to see," he said. "There's nothing left for me here. Not unless someone wanted to stay." Eva's face didn't change. She looked down at her hands. "I never asked you to wait." "I know," he said softly. "I just thought, maybe—" She didn't respond. The silence between them said everything they couldn't. That night, Sam started coughing. At first, it was just a dry sound, soft and scattered. Eva barely noticed. But as the hours passed, the coughs grew deeper, sharper. Then came the fever. His skin was hot to the touch. His little face turned red, then pale, then red again. He couldn't eat, couldn't drink. He tossed and turned, crying in his sleep. Eva didn't panic. She stayed calm, quieter than usual, if that was even possible. She moved a small chair to the side of his bed, brought cool water, and wiped his forehead with a cloth again and again. She whispered softly, humming the lullabies her mother once sang to her. Levi knocked once and entered, carrying more water and firewood. He said nothing, just placed the bucket down and stood beside her. Doc says it's just fever, he said. Children get it sometimes. Eva nodded. I know. He'll be okay. She nodded again, but her eyes didn't move from Sam. 2 full days passed. The fever clung to the boy like a shadow. He whimpered in his sleep. Sometimes he called for someone, a name they didn't recognize. Sometimes he just moaned. Eva never left his side. She barely ate. She didn't sleep. She held his hand when he cried. She changed his damp clothes. She sat there, whispering things only mothers whispered. Once, in the middle of the night, Levi came in and placed a blanket around her shoulders. She didn't look up, but she didn't pull away either. You care about him, he said. She didn't answer. You can say it, Eva. She whispered, but I shouldn't. On the 3rd morning, the fever finally broke. Sam opened his eyes. They were glazed, tired, but he saw her face, saw her messy braid, her tired eyes, the way she smiled the moment his eyes blinked open. He opened his dry lips and whispered, Mama. Eva's hands shook. She didn't move for a moment. Then, slowly, she leaned down and kissed his burning forehead. She didn't correct him. She didn't tell him she wasn't his mother. She stayed by his side, humming her lullaby once more. The next afternoon, Sam was resting peacefully. Eva stood outside the boarding house, staring at the dusty road. The townspeople passed by without looking. Life went on. Levi approached, slow and careful. He stood beside her, not speaking at first. Then, I can take him to the ranch. Until you decide. Eva looked at him. I've decided. He raised an eyebrow. I'm not giving him up, she said simply. Levi waited. I don't know how to be a mother. Not really. I was never allowed to be. But when he's sick, I can't leave him. When he smiles, I feel something I haven't in years. He called me Mama, and I didn't want to say no. Levi smiled gently. You didn't need to. She turned to him. You're still selling the ranch. I was, he said, but I haven't hammered the last nail in that sign yet. Eva nodded. Then she surprised them both by whispering, what if we made a home? For him. For us. If that's what you still want. Levi smiled. I've been wanting that since the moment I saw you standing outside that church, he said. You weren't just heartbroken. You were waiting for the right beginning. Eva didn't speak again, but her hand found his. And inside the room, the boy slept peacefully for the first time in days, dreaming of the only family he'd ever known. It was a Sunday morning, and the sun rose soft and golden over the hills, painting the little town in quiet peace. This time, the crowd didn't gather in stiff clothes or fancy hats. There was no preacher waiting by the altar, no organ music in the air. Instead, families brought blankets, baskets, and laughter. It was a picnic just outside the same church where a bride had once been left standing alone. The tall grass swayed in the breeze, and wildflowers peeked up through the dirt, like hope that kept coming back no matter how many boots tried to stomp it down. Some people came with curiosity, others with kindness, but most came with food in their arms and stories on their lips. They didn't ask questions. They had heard enough, seen enough, and deep down they knew. This was not a wedding, not in the way they expected, but something deeper was happening. Something real. Eva walked slowly toward the open field. Her white dress was the same one she wore that painful day, but now was different. She had washed it, stitched the torn lace at the hem, and let it dry in the wind. She wore no shoes, and her feet touched the earth like she belonged to it again. Her dark hair was tied back loosely, the way Sam liked it, and her face held no makeup, no decoration, just truth. In her hand was not a bouquet, but the small fingers of a boy who wouldn't let go. Sam clung to her side like a shadow made of sunshine, and his eyes lit up as he looked around at the people laughing and eating pie and waving at him. He wore clean clothes and a straw hat that kept falling off his head. Every time he picked it up, he giggled like life was finally a game he was allowed to play. Levi stood near the edge of the gathering, one hand on his belt, the other holding a jar of lemonade someone handed him. He didn't speak much, but his eyes watched Evil like she was something rare and worth guarding. His tan duster coat was gone, traded for a cleaner shirt and jeans that showed signs of wear, but smelled of soap. He didn't try to come too close. He knew this wasn't his moment. It was hers. Still, every few minutes, Sam would look back at him and wave, and Levi would tip his hat in reply. That was their way of talking, quiet, clear, with nothing needing to be said out loud. Eva walked toward the church doors but didn't go inside. She stopped on the grass just before the steps. She looked around, and everyone grew still. Children stopped running. Old men stopped chewing. Even the birds seemed to hush. For a long time, she didn't speak. Then she turned to Sam and knelt. "This is where I thought my life ended," she whispered, brushing a curl off his forehead. "But I think it's where it really began." Sam didn't understand all the words, but he leaned in and kissed her cheek. Eva stood, brushed the dust off her dress, and looked out at the people who once pitied her, mocked her, or felt sorry from afar. She wasn't angry. She wasn't ashamed. She just said, loud enough for all to hear, "We were all left behind in one way or another. But somehow we found each other." A soft breeze moved through the crowd. Someone clapped, then another, and soon the quiet turned to warm laughter and cheers. It wasn't the sound of a wedding. It was the sound of healing. Levi walked toward her then, slow but sure, and stopped just a few feet away. He looked at Eva, then at Sam, then back to Eva. "Took a lost boy," he said, his voice quiet but steady, "to make us all see what matters." Eva nodded, her eyes damp. She didn't need a ring or a promise in front of a crowd. What she had now was more than she ever asked for. Sam, now too restless to stand still, wriggled his hand free and ran off into the tall grass. His laughter floated behind him like a song. Eva watched him go, her hands empty now, but her heart full. She turned to Levi. "You're not going to sell that ranch, are you?" she asked gently. Levi chuckled. "Not if you're cooking biscuits there," he said. She smiled. "I burn the bottoms, you know." Levi shrugged. "I eat fast." The afternoon passed like a dream, slow, golden, and kind. The sun hung above like it wanted to stay a little longer. Children played tag, older folks told stories, and someone played a fiddle off to the side. Eva walked among the people with bare feet and a calm heart. She wasn't a bride anymore. She was something else. A woman who had been broken, left behind, told she wasn't enough, and who still chose to open her arms and say, "Come here. You're mine." Later, as the sky turned soft with evening, Sam returned from the field with a flower in his hand. It was bent and dirty, but he held it like treasure. He handed it to Eva. "For you, Mama," he said. No one corrected him, not even Eva. She bent down, took the flower, and kissed his forehead. "Thank you, sweetheart." Levi walked over and stood beside them. Sam looked up at both of them. "Do mamas and cowboys stay together forever?" he asked. Levi scratched his chin. "Well," he said, "depends if the cowboy behaves." Eva laughed, a sound lighter than anything she had made in months. "We'll see," she said. And for once, the future didn't feel like a wait. It felt like an open road. As the stars began to peek out and the fireflies danced near the edges of the grass, someone lit a lantern. It glowed between them, Levi, Eva, and Sam, not as a symbol of what they'd lost, but what they had found. A home made not of walls or paper, but of shared glances, soft words, and hands that held on even when they were scared. That night, no vows were spoken, no promises written down, but something sacred passed between them, seen only by the stars. It was the kind of bond no storm could tear apart. A family that found itself not by blood or law, but by love. And Sam? He slept soundly in Eva's arms that night, dreaming not of trains or stations or strangers, but of tall grass, laughter, and a mama who stayed. The wind carried a soft hum through the valley, brushing against the tall grass that swayed like it had learned to dance. The house sat quiet and small at the edge of a dirt path, with paint peeling off its wooden frame and smoke curling gently from the chimney. It wasn't grand. It didn't shine. But inside it, something rare and quiet had taken root, something stronger than paper or promise. A home. Eva stood by the window, her hands damp from washing clothes, her eyes tracking the boy who was no longer so little. Sam ran across the yard, a lopsided grin on his face, chasing after a stubborn chicken that had slipped the fence again. He didn't trip over his feet as often these days. His arms and legs were growing longer, his curls wilder, and his questions never stopped. "Leave that bird alone," Levi called from the fence line, hammer in hand. "It's smarter than you," Sam shouted back. "That's what makes it fun." Levi chuckled and wiped his forehead with the back of his sleeve. He had aged some, not from years but from peace. His jaw stayed relaxed more often now. He no longer kept his hat low over his eyes like a shield. He had started to let the world see him again, piece by piece, and Eva had watched it happen from the window, from across the dinner table, from a swing on the porch. Eva opened the door and stepped outside, her bare feet touching the warm wooden porch. "He's going to chase the thing till it leads him straight into town. That'd give the townsfolk something to talk about," Levi replied, glancing over his shoulder. "They're getting bored since we stopped being the big mystery." She smiled. "We're still the mystery. We just don't make noise about it." There was no wedding, no license, no legal paper. They never chased last names or filed claims. Some things didn't need to be stamped to be true. What they built was something quieter, deeper, made of morning routines, quiet dinners, and a child's laughter bouncing off walls that once echoed silence. Inside, Sam finally gave up on the chicken and flopped onto the floor, breathing hard and grinning wide. Eva dried her hands and knelt beside him. "Got tired?" He nodded. "That bird's too fast. Or you're too slow," Levi said, stepping in with dirt on his boots and sawdust on his sleeves. Sam looked at both of them, eyes dancing. "You two should race next." Eva laughed. "I'd win." "No way," Levi said. "You'd trip over your own pride." They all laughed, the sound warm and soft like fresh bread. Then Sam quieted, looked up at them with something more serious tucked behind his smile. "Can I help with dinner?" Eva nodded. "Wash your hands first." He ran to the basin, splashing water in all directions. Eva shook her head, but let it go. She wasn't the same woman who once stood outside a church with torn lace and a heart that didn't know how to beat for anything anymore. That woman had buried her hope with her dreams. But now, every morning when Sam ran to her, yelling about chickens or clouds or books, something bloomed again inside her, something that looked like love. Sam dried his hands, took the potatoes, and began peeling, slowly, with the focus of a scholar. "Miss Eva," he said, "what's a last name for?" She paused, the spoon in her hand hovering above the stew. "Why do you ask?" "Some kids at the creek asked me what mine was. I told them I forgot." Levi leaned back in his chair. Not a bad answer. Eva glanced at Levi, then looked back at Sam. "A last name is something families share." Sam frowned. "Like a password?" "Kind of," Levi said. "But ours doesn't need one. We know who we are." Sam smiled. "Yeah, I don't want a last name anyway. It sounds like something that can be taken away." Eva's heart squeezed. She reached out and touched his cheek. "No one's taking you, Sam. Not ever." "I know," he whispered. That night, the stars sat heavy and low, filling the sky like a blanket. The three of them sat on the porch. Sam lay on a blanket between them, tired from chores and sunshine. He had learned to ride now, sitting tall and proud on Levi's old mare. He read full pages of books with Eva, sounding out hard words and asking for new ones. He helped patch holes in the roof and crack jokes when things got quiet. Levi passed, Eva a cup of tea. We did all right. We did, she said. They listened to the crickets sing. Sam stirred, his voice soft and half asleep. Mama. Eva looked down. Yes, baby. I prayed. She brushed the hair from his forehead. What did you say? I said thank you for giving me a mama and a papa. Levi's breath caught. Eva's eyes filled, but she didn't cry. Instead, she reached out for Levi's hand in the dark and held it tightly. No one left behind now, Levi whispered. And just like that, the world felt whole. The next morning, Eva packed a lunch for Sam to take on his ride with Levi. Sam had a little saddlebag now, filled with dried fruit, bread, and the small book he was practicing reading aloud. Levi always let him talk the whole ride, even if the words tumbled over each other like stones down a hill. When they were gone, Eva swept the floors, sang to herself, and sat at the table with her sewing. She wasn't waiting anymore. Her life wasn't on hold. This was her story now, stitched from pieces she never thought she'd hold again. Later, when the sun dipped low, Sam came back with a scraped knee and a wildflower he insisted was for her. It matches your eyes, he said proudly. Eva laughed. You mean it's brown and always tired? Sam made a face. No, it's pretty. Levi stood behind him, arms crossed, lips twitching with amusement. He got that from you. Eva blushed. Then I should watch what I teach him. Supper that night was loud. Sam talked through every bite. Levi added quiet comments. Eva just smiled and passed the bread. Afterward, they played a game with pebbles and guessing, one Sam had made up. No one cared who won. The house glowed with candlelight and warmth. Weeks passed. The weather shifted. The valley changed color with the seasons. But the rhythm stayed steady. Morning started with chores and ended with stories. Evenings brought laughter and small moments that mattered more than grand ones ever could. One evening, Sam sat on the fence with Levi. Do I have to be a cowboy? No, Levi said. You could be anything. Can I be a reader? Or a teacher? Or the man who rings the bell in town? You could be all three, Levi said. Or none. What matters is you don't forget who you are. Sam nodded. I'm Sam. No last name. Just Sam. And that's enough, Levi said. Eva stood at the porch, watching them. Her arms were folded, but her heart was wide open. Every day, she remembered the moment that little boy tugged on her torn dress and asked if she was his mama. She hadn't known then what the answer was. But now there was no doubt. Yes, she was. And she always would be. On Sam's next birthday, they didn't throw a party. They took a picnic up the hill near the old church. The same hill where Eva once stood alone in her wedding dress, the day her life cracked open. She wore the same dress again, patched and worn now, the lace soft from age. She stood barefoot in the grass, watching the boy and the man who had filled her life with purpose. Sam ran up the hill and flung his arms around her waist. You gonna cry? Not today, Eva whispered, holding him close. Levi joined them with a smile. We'll eat now, or the ants will beat us to it. They sat on a blanket, shared food, shared laughter, and shared a life they had built from almost nothing. No documents, no rules, just faith in each other, in love, in second chances. As the sun set, Sam leaned against Eva's shoulder. You think my real mama sees me? Eva kissed his hair. I think she's proud of you. Levi added, and thankful you found your way to us. Sam smiled. Yeah, I think so too. And in that moment, under a fading sky, with crumbs in their laps and dirt on their feet, the little family without last names sat in quiet joy. They didn't need more. They had enough. They had each other. Forever.